All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our monthly coffee chat. Thank you for starting your day with us. My name is Rachel Zamsky, and I am the marketing specialist here at Aqueduct Technologies. I just want to note that today's call is being recorded. We want to keep this interactive, so if at any point you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the chat or Q&A box, and Rick and Dave will answer those. Without further ado, Rick, the floor is yours if you'd like to introduce yourself and our guest for today.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on our monthly coffee chat series where we focus in on cybersecurity and talk about the various topics that are important to you guys. And I feel like, this education series is really just us giving back and letting you know what we're up against. So I'm Rick Beaupre. I am a solution architect at Aqueduct. I cover the cybersecurity space. And so everything cybersecurity that comes into your day-to-day business, I work with many customers on that. Today, I'm also joined by Dave Phillips. Dave is a peer of mine. He's been in the industry 20 plus years. Sorry, I'm outing you, Dave. But Dave brings a unique vision to us today in the sense of Dave fosters our internal programs. So you're going to kind of hear a little bit about how we do things internally as well as how things are externally. So good morning, Dave.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. So today's agenda, pretty straightforward. We did the instructions, but I'm going to talk a little bit about NIST 1.1 and talk about the framework and, the success with it. We're going to jump into NIST 2.0 and talk about the upcoming changes and the enhancements to it. And then I'll follow up with some recap and some next steps for you. Let's kind of dive right into it. So historically, many organizations have struggled with timely breach detection, right? So oftentimes it takes months to discover a breach, you know. However, with the advances in technologies, that gets better. But we're still looking at 206 days to discover a breach. And we know that with various industry reports and studies, the average time to breach detection is decreasing. Sometimes we've seen it down to 100 days, 200 days, but it's still worth noting that, this is still a long time for them to be into our networks and causing us issues. And then what are the costs, right? So we're looking at the cost of a forensics investigation. We're looking at regulatory or industry fines. And oh, by the way, we have to remediate everything that's been discovered from vulnerabilities or time to recover from a particular outage. We may have litigation. We may have, because we had consumer data, we may have litigation for the fact of the industry, if you're a public company, the SEC. But most important, and I think this is really where we as cybersecurity practitioners focus in on, is the brand reputation. I think it's important for us to, when we embark on cybersecurity, when we embark on all of this, that we are protecting our brand. We're protecting, what our intellectual property is and how the market embraces us.
I'd also add on that slide, loss of business and productivity becomes an issue at that point as well, where, we've all seen when there's a breach and we follow our incident response plans that it's a little bit chaotic for a good period of time. And there's a potential to not only lose business, but to lose productivity within your organization if you don't have your I's dotted and your T's crossed as far as your program is concerned.
And we've actually seen that with customers. Ones that have mature plans recover a lot faster than ones who don't have any plans, and then these events catch them by surprise. Right? We've seen that on both ends of it.
Yeah, it's a good combo too, right? And I was even thinking on the if we go back to one of the first slides and talk about the average time to detect a breach, right? If we do have our program in place and we are mature in that process, 206 days is the average, but that also means that there are some folks that are identifying a breach much sooner because of their program is more mature, and the folks that are taking longer to realize the breach might not have a program in place at all or not very mature in the process. So figured I'd add that thought in as well.
Yeah, and Dave, you bring up an important distinction in the fact that it's a program, right? So it's vendor neutral. We haven't mentioned any products or anything, but it's vendor neutral, and the programs really do help um, when an incident happens to um, respond appropriately because it's everybody's on board, everybody knows what's going on. You may have done a tabletop, or even if you've done nothing, you have a one page. At least you have a map to get you through. And this kind of
Exactly.
brings us, why do we use a framework, right? It's here strictly, design, implement, and continually improve our cyber discipline. NIST CFS was first created in 2014, an executive order from President Obama, mandating increased cybersecurity for the nation's critical infrastructures. Yeah, it's really 1.0, right? So the framework itself, I identified these five functions, which we kind of live by today, even if you don't have a framework. But mostly we break these out as an industry: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Right. So those are really our silos. And then in 2018, we saw this revision to what we have today. On 1.1, right? Dave, internally we adopt this. So why do you feel frameworks are so important?
It's interesting. Our title's solution architect, and I've been a solution architect for the bulk of my 20 some years in the industry. And then we talk about just looking at the word framework, right? If we're doing our job up front, we are creating a program first and foremost. And when I refer to a program, I'm not so much talking about the technology piece of it first. I'm always talking about the governance piece of it first. So it's the more boring portion of a security program. I just refer to it as the paperwork, right? So we start with a written plan, and that basically describes how our organization is going to deal with security as a whole. And it's written and it's documented. And that written plan, or written information security program, or WISP, refers to the policies that we are now going to put in place. And then the policies will dictate the controls that I put in place to mitigate any risk moving forward, right? So it's in my mind a top-down approach, and it starts from the paperwork, the documentation, and putting everything in writing on how we are going to, quote unquote, do security within our organizations, and then everything else will follow. So if we're planning as an architect, or we're following a framework, it's the basis of our program, and it's the most important part in my opinion.
Yeah, so that kind of points to business outcomes, right? So one of the things, let me just go back that I think you brought up that's important. A lot of times security practitioners start from the bottom up, right? We have to protect the endpoint. We have to protect, and while all is good, I think the fundamental shift that you brought up is from the top down. And I think in my mind as a practitioner, that's a clearer approach, because when you go bottom up, you're going to get the sprawl. It's really kind of hard. To me, it's always like, you're trying to hold back, the logs on a dam, and ones are coming by. Whereas you have the top down approach, you get this triangle effect, and it's just a lot easier to manage. And again, when we're talking about aligning NIST to business outcomes, for us doing top down makes it pretty straightforward, because we're going to do the measures and metrics, right? So we're going to measure ourselves. How are we? Where are we? We're going to look at our portfolio that we have, our tools that we have, whether they're off the shelf, open source, in-house tools that are made. And we're going to look at those and then analyze those to understand, can we recover? Can we do all of the things that we necessarily need to do with those tools? If we don't, we're going to have to create a tech roadmap to fill in these obvious places that we need to add, new tech or something, continuous monitoring, whatever it may be. As we create this roadmap, let's look at business constraints. What can we do? Where's our main lines of businesses? Where are those stored? Where are those softwares housed? Can we continue and monitor? Can the network move dynamically? And then more importantly, we're seeing this a lot in our cybersecurity space, is the resource allocation. Where teams are leaning mean these days, right? And they're like, okay, hey, I got to do this with you. I got to add this extra project to my day to day. we as an organization try to alleviate that and help with the resource allocation, but it's important to determine that as you're doing it. And then once the program is in place, once you're at a great framework, then you just have the operational handoff from there. Anything you want to add on this one, Dave?
Yeah, in my mind, it still all maps back to the framework or the program or planning, right? Typically, in my experience, even back when I was doing physical security in my early days, 90% of the folks that wanted an alarm system in their business or their house had gotten broken into. So it's been very reactive over the years. And that bleeds into network and cybersecurity. It's always been reactive, right? Something bad happens, we realize there's a gap, we scramble around, we fill the gap, and then we go on to our day-to-day jobs until the next incident happens. Getting in front of that and having a plan in place, and all of the things that you see here on the screen, being able to properly plan for those puts us in a better spot for our security program. So, I'll always go back and emphasize on the written plan and the documented plan and making sure we're paying attention to that plan moving forward, and everything else kind of falls into place if we're planning properly.
Yeah, it's a valid point.
You'll get sick of hearing me say that.
Yeah, it kind of brings us to our next thing. Let's grab a coffee real quick. Kind of brings us to our next point, right? Why is NIST 1.1 so successful? In my mind, it's because it was comprehensive, or it still is comprehensive and flexible, had industry collaboration, takes a risk-based approach. But one thing, it's always constantly improved on. Yeah, whether we're taking different things from different industry folks, or they're always trying to uh, make it better. And I would add that it can be attributed to these collective efforts like company, organizations, government agencies, cybersecurity professionals who have implemented it. And it's been adopted by various industries, right? So it's not just manufacturing, it's not just healthcare, it's not just finance. It literally can go to all realms.
Interesting point there as well, is a lot of the other framework or compliancy tools or mechanisms aligned to NIST. So NIST has, is mapped into CMMC. There's parts of NIST and a lot of the cybersecurity frameworks themselves, and they refer back to NIST. So to me, it's kind of the gold standard. If you want to start somewhere and you haven't started and you don't know where to start, I think NIST is a great spot to do that.
Yeah, we're also seeing, right, the framework has been voluntarily adopted, but now we're seeing cyber insurance companies mandate that as a baseline standard, just like you said.
Yeah, and the insurance conversation could go down a rabbit hole real quick, but in my experience, I'm starting to see the insurance companies adopt tools to put your money where your mouth is, right? For the organizations that they're insuring, quite like ourselves at Aqueduct, these insurance companies are implementing tools to be able to not only send you the questionnaire and review the answers, but see if you can back your answers up in the way of them doing a vulnerability scan or some sort of assessment. So I think that cyber insurance organizations are maturing as well, and it's going to make it harder for us to have things slip through the cracks moving forward.
I saw on a questionnaire that I recently helped a customer for, and the last page it said, "Your signature is true in a test." And it was like you're talking to the customer, it was to make sure that we had all of these things in place. To your point, we are seeing them do scans on organizations to make sure that it is true in a test.
Absolutely.
Let's take a deeper dive real quick into the framework and why it's been so successful. When we look at it, there's three core components, which is really your core from it. And I'll take a deeper dive into what this means. Adding profiles and adding tiers to this. So it's pretty straightforward in how you build these in these three main components. And we look at this first one, the core itself, we're seeing some common set of cybersecurity activities that we want to do. So when we look left here, again, the 5 profiles that I talked about, we use those across all our critical infrastructure. We provide these high-level strategic life cycle, organizational management to these. So kind of parse that down. We really want to look at CSF as designed to help organizations, do the identify, do the protect, do the detect, respond, and recover consistently, right? So we want it to be, these concurrent, continuous functions that are repeatable. So when we look at the idea of the categories in here, and we look out and how things are parsed out, we look at identify, we're really looking at understanding and manage the cyber risk. So whether it's to our systems, assets, data, we're identifying those critical assets, we're looking at vulnerabilities, and importantly, we're determining our risk tolerance. And you're going to kind of hear a lot more of this in 2.0. We'll dive into it in a little bit, but risk is really, really becoming important. The protect function, we're going to really look at implementing those safeguards. So we want to ensure, our critical systems are protected, right? We're protecting our assets. So I was saying when I first learned cybersecurity, protect your assets. Detect is really the function of this continuous monitoring. I think you've heard me mention that a few times, but the continuous monitoring is, a mainstay, a staple of an organization. So you want to look at your baseline, you want to look at your normal day activities, and you want to be able to detect any abnormal activity in your environment quickly. The respond really takes it to, you're going to make the steps to respond to an incident. I always look at it as if you don't have an incident response plan, at least just put something on a page that if this happens, this is who I'm going to call, this is who I'm going to reach out to. It really takes the stress level down a lot to have some sort of incident response plan. Dave's heard me say this hundreds of times. I'm a very strong mental health advocate. And when you have an event, your mental health, it takes a beating. To have a plan, to have an incident response plan, to have all of that written out ahead of time, even if it's loose, you can always tighten it up. It really does take it up. And then to me, the recover, really being able to restore and recover your capabilities, that were affected. Again, that brings you back to that brand management thing.
Yeah, and they're also closely intertwined, right? But I do always go back to the respond piece as well. As practitioners or stakeholders of the business at the executive level, we have to keep in mind that, and I know this term has been mentioned ad nauseum, it's not if, it's when, right? Or assumption of breach. Again, if we're putting our program in place and we're planning, the respond piece of it is a very large piece of it, because it's an important part in being or recognizing a breach and getting to the recover phase, right? If we can't respond correctly, if we don't have the proper plan in place, it's hard to get to the recover phase, right? So if we're not planning properly, if we don't have a documented incident response that involves not only the technical people, but the stakeholders of the business, maybe our partners, maybe the supply chain. Oh, by the way, in 2.0, supply chain is emphasized a lot more than it was in 1.1. So very, very important on the respond piece that we're planning accordingly, and that we have a plan in place that when something does happen, we can eloquently respond, and we don't have to worry about our mental health and kind of the Keystone Cops method, where everybody's scrambling around trying to figure out how to fix what's just happened and how to notify all the correct people. It's quite an intricate process if you really boil it down.
Yeah, you talk about the respond, and I kind of correlate respond, recover to the resilience piece of it, right? And we've had these discussions both internally and externally. Where are you on the cybersecurity framework tier, right? How do you move left to right? And you want to take a few minutes and talk about, kind of what you're seeing and where organizations are shifting and
Yeah, and maybe even map it to what we've done internally. first and foremost, we have that plan, we have that written plan in place, and we have policies to support the plan, and we have tech, for the control aspect to support the policies. On top of that, we've created a cybersecurity steering committee, and it involves a lot of folks within the organization, from executives all the way up to the CEO, Monik, right? And all the way down to the nitty-gritty, stakeholders and owners of technologies. And we meet on a regular basis to not only talk about where our program is at from a maturity perspective, but we're constantly reviewing and updating the policies themselves. And we're kind of moving and shaking and adapting to, and you'll see this in NIST 2.0 as well. They emphasize your policies have to morph as breaches and vulnerabilities morph, as the technology morphs, as technologists. I'm sure we're all involved in technology, obviously, in some way, shape, or form on this call. It's forever changing, right? So to have a policy in place that's been sitting there for 2 years based on old threats, backing it up and implementing the controls with old technology just isn't going to fly, right? So the maturity aspect of the program involves all of that, and also engaging, third parties to make sure that all this work that we're doing internally to create the program, to review the policies, to review the tech, somebody needs to keep us on our toes. So bring in a third party to do vulnerability assessments, scans. Even we have solutions that we use to check our own maturity. So we can say all day long that, yeah, we're great. Our program is, is in great shape and we're at tier 3 or tier 4, but bring somebody in to check and balance and to keep you in check as your program morphs and the technology morphs with it.
And no matter what size of your business, right? So even if you're an SMB space, you really should look at this, because one of the things that we are seeing is on the smaller businesses, the bad actors are doing recon. If I want to target a large healthcare system, or if I want to target a large financial institution, I'm going to start small to see how my tools work in a smaller environment. And if I get something along the way, well, that's fantastic, right? So, we're seeing a lot of that recon on the smaller side. So, it's really important to have a plan here. We typically see folks are, somewhere in between tier 1 and tier 2, right? So they have a partial plan, they are risk informed. They've identified some basic process and procedures, a general awareness of cyber risk. They have in their mind how to respond to an incident, but nothing really formal. As they get more formal, we're kind of looking at moving towards the tier 2 to tier 3 methodology, and really tier 3 is that repeatable, right? So we want to, like you've been talking about this whole thing, formal policies, formal procedures. We practice it. We may do tabletops. We may look at these risk assessments, again, third party from there. The goal is for all of us to reach 4, which is really that adaptive, right? And that's really where we can really continuously address those emerging threats. It's so important to be dynamic. It's so important to, understand it, because these threats are continually changing. We're seeing some pretty interesting attacks, of recent, and it's only going to get worse with the AI options that that are coming from there.
And I believe we'll see more of this as time moves on, the maturity level. There's a framework, CMMC, that was built around, protecting unclassified data in DoD. Although, as recently as about a year ago, I was working, doing some vCISO consulting work for a college in the New England area, and they were adopting CMMC solely for being able to track the maturity of their program. CMMC has 3 tiers of maturity, right? So I think, and now that NIST has always had it, right? But I think you'll see more emphasis on the different tiers and how you now move yourself up from, a tier 1 to a tier 4 and make your program more mature. And it involves all the things that I always talk about. So I think you'll see a lot more of that moving forward. And for the folks that are responsible or semi-responsible for their own security program at their own place of business. I think this is a key thing to kind of differentiate yourself within the organization to, hey, we really need to keep our eye on where we're at with our program, and we need to continue to build it and continue to improve it. And if you're the catalyst, you and your team are the catalyst to do that, I think it's good exposure and you know, great due diligence to get yourself in a healthy position.
Yeah, those are great words, Dave, because I always see sometimes customers can get overwhelmed, right? So you look at, you know, you have 800.171, you have 800.207, the zero trust, you have all of these different things. And I said, well, let's take a step back. Let's just do the cybersecurity framework first. Let's get this baseline in. And then when you get, you know, into your categories or your profiles, then you can add, you know, specific program plans like 207 or 171 to add to your organization, right? I think those are really, really important. And to your point with the CMMC, that really takes the NIST framework and kind of, it, you know, kind of builds out a you know, a wider net for it as well. Let's kind of wrap this up here with the profiles itself. And that's really everything we talked about in here. That's really looking at your framework core, right? So taking those 5 functions and laying those out from there, really to help, you know, manage and address the cybersecurity. The resilience tier, that's really going to be your implementation tier. Like, where am I in that tier? Kind of rate yourself. When you're, you know, get a little bit more mature, you can have somebody come in and help with you as far as, you know, where am I in my maturity cycle. And then I talked about with the categories, you're really going to look at, where do I need to fit in from this category perspective? Do I need to look at PII, right? Am I looking at PCI because I have customer credit cards? If I HIPAA shop because I have healthcare data? Do I have multiple, right? We're seeing a lot of healthcare organizations now that not only have to look at healthcare data, PII, PCI, DSS, you know, there's a lot more coming down the road. And we've seen that both with healthcare and finance. But when you put all of these categories together, you're going to kind of build your cybersecurity profile. And when you build your cybersecurity profile, you want to look at it from your current state and your target state. So where am I? Where do I want to go from there? And you'll see whether you do this on 1.1 and move it to 2.0, you can kind of look at the differences from there. But that's really a great place to start from there. We do have a online evaluation from there where you can do your cyber risk program maturity yourself. It's you know, you click on this, it's 10 to 15 questions that will, you know, you can ask yourself, and it'll print out, you know, where you are from a risk resilience perspective, and kind of give you some feedback of what you can do to kind of improve your overall options from there. So let's kind of bring it home here with what's coming in NIST 2.0. I'm pretty excited about this because I think it's a lot of great improvements. You know, it's enhancing the flexibility and customizations. You know, it's aligning to what we do today. You know, it addresses these new risk zones. You talked about that, right? Dave, governance, you know, privacy risk management, whether it's GDPR, the US CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, which I feel is going to be a catalyst for a lot of states that are passing their own rules. You talked about it. There's going to be supply chain security introduced, which is, you know, a better way of measuring and assessing security risk, right? We look at it here from there, and you have the 1.1 and you have 2.0, which is officially called the discussion draft at this point. You take sorry, my Alexa went off. You take the identify portion of it, and you kind of move that over into a new pillar, which is called governance, right? So really, this is really going to put an emphasis on governing your organization, building your risk tolerance. It also calls out policies and procedures, so it makes it much more defined in these policies and procedures. Whereas 1.1, did policies and procedures, but they were kind of lower into the category function. Now they're bringing it to the top with governance. And then again, improvements, right? Used to be recover, you improve yourself, but it's really been moved up to the identify, which is that continuous improvement, right? So I feel that's an important distinction on here. Oops. And you can see from this aspect of it, we have governance, we have the policies, we have the improvements all at the top of, the cybersecurity framework. You have something to add here, Dave?
Yeah, a couple things. So that 2.0 discussion draft, I encourage you guys to take a look at that. It goes into detail on each one of the categories and the subcategories and what has changed from 1.1 to 2.0. From a very high level, I'll just say that there's more detail on every category and subcategory, and they've even added some subcategories. Me being the paperwork guy or the governance guy, I'll read a couple to you verbatim just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm seeing. GVPO 02, which states the same policies used internally are applied externally to suppliers. So it's starting to creep out, and it's starting to address more external entities, and including supply chain, as opposed to just focusing on internal policies and controls. So they're basically saying, hey, whatever you guys implement internally, you need to push out to your suppliers, to your partners. GVPO 03, and I kind of talked about this before, states policies and procedures are reviewed, updated, and communicated to reflect changes in requirements, threats, technology, and organizational mission. So that statement to me says a lot. It's basically saying that we need to pay attention to our policies and to what's going on in the world around us. And not only that, right, to our earlier point of business outcomes, it specifically mentions organizational mission, right? So there's a lot going on in that statement, and I think it was very well needed. So again, take a look at that discussion draft 2.0 if you can, and you can get a better idea of what's been put in place as opposed to 1.1 and see some of the detail there. We could even maybe send out a link to the doc, right, Rick?
I do have it in there, Dave, as you said, it's a resource link, but I also have a copy of the draft too that I can give to Rachel to get out to people that are attending today, because I think it's important to read the draft from there to kind of see what's coming. To your point, Dave, the supply chain management, third-party risk is really now taking a lot of attention here with NIST and us as cybersecurity practitioners. We see a lot of breaches that have happened. Big, notoriety breaches have all been from third party, where they were able to get in and, you could have the strongest security in the world, but you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So if you have folks, third party systems coming in, look at it, make sure they're following their due diligence, make sure you're auditing them. We get audited all the time, so we understand how that is, but it's important for us and for other people to understand the third party risk.
Right, it's continuous improvement. It's also a bit reactionary, like I spoke of before. But to your point, right? I mean, we're talking in 2.0, we're talking a lot more about supply chain and external entities, because that's been the trend over the past couple of years. If I can't get in through your perimeter or your endpoint and everything in between, I'm going to use somebody else that I know is in there already. So we're paying a lot more attention to it now, and it just kind of seems to support the continuous improvement and the road to maturity as far as the security program is concerned.
Yeah, and let's look at the timeline when it's coming. We're here in the summer draft, so when we share that document with you, this is the one that you will see. There will be a fall workshop. One of the things that I like to talk about is be involved. In the summer workshop you can attend. There's going to be a webinar. It's open to the public. This is the point where you can add comments. So what are you doing? If you have a mature program, explain, put in the feedback loop, where you're having success, where you're not having success, because, with this risk resilience push that we're having, it's going to get a lot better if we all comment on it, we all add our input on it, and then collectively, we can move forward. Based on all of that, and based on everything that we see, you should see the final CFS somewhere early 2024. Typically, most times NIST are going to push that around the March-April timeframe. Given everything I've seen and different things I've been involved in, it's probably going to be in the mid-April timeframe of 2024. From that, you'll see when we send you the draft, it's pretty far down the road. There are little things they want comments. They want to look at a little deeper dive onto third-party risk, but I think it's important that, we all be involved in it. So what should you do? Again, review those changes that are coming. Start evaluating the changes, what they mean for your program. This summer, keep an eye out for that draft. We'll send you a copy of it, but there's going to be updates to it. But really determine the updates for you and your organization and what they mean. So if you haven't done it, do 1.1 and then what 2.0 means for there. And again, I'm always a community participant, so get involved if you can. What is 2.0 going to do for us? Really, it's going to be driving that implementation, right? And then I always say, differentiate yourself, right? Be proactive and be prepared for that change.
So it's interesting, Rick, I just wanted to chime in real quick on the community, thought process, right? So not only is it the community sharing thoughts and sharing how they approach security to feed into this continuous improvement and any maturity model as it pertains to cyber security, you'll see the technology partners are kind of doing the same now. There's a lot of buzz around integrations, even with competing products, to share telemetry and to share this data to try to stop the bad actors. So it's not only happening from a people perspective, it's happening from a technology perspective. And may have saved this till the end, but just to let you guys know, as far as security and programs and the technology, Rick and I are very passionate about the subject. So outside of any formal engagements with Aqueduct, feel free to reach out to us and pick our brains and have the conversation on any and all of this stuff, because we love having the conversation and sharing our thoughts and experiences with you guys.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, whether we're speaking at public events or different things, or, doing the podcast or doing our engineer blog. It's really just sharing what we know. And we're in a great position because we see multiple different kinds of networks and multiple different kinds of businesses, and can kind of, take in a net neutral approach to what folks are doing. All right, we're getting close to time, so let's kind of wrap up here. Recap of what you see today. And here we're looking at the 5 areas of NIST, the 1.1, and we're adding, the core tiers and profiles that really get you that place that you need to be at. So as we wrap up here, familiarize yourself with the NIST CSF 2.0. Again, we'll send you a draft copy of that. But importantly, do a gap analysis of 1.1 to 2.0 for yourself. Update your risk assessment. But importantly, customize the framework for you, for your business, what's important. Look at your critical assets, look at your line of businesses and say, hey, this is where I, need to build this framework. Add supply chain security. We are talking about third-party risk a lot. Understand who has access to your network, whether it's remote access users, all the way up to third parties and site-to-site VPNs to continue your line of business. Integrate your privacy risk management system. So look at the idea of privacy and understanding what data you're trying to protect and build programs around that. You're going to see things of data security posture management. So DSPM is going to be pretty prevalent coming up, because that's really where we're kind of headed down to the market. Enhance your threat intelligence and detection capability, so that continuous monitoring I talked about. Look at your measure of metrics, your KPIs. How quick can I respond to something? How quick can I recover from something? Where am I at on that? Update your policies and procedures. They make sure they're dynamic. They always have to be updated, whether you do that quarterly, semi-annually, annually, really what's important to your business. But just make sure they're updated. And finally, execute a phased implementation. Don't bite off too much. Take your time with it. Enhance what you got, and just keep building on that. You have anything to add on to here, Dave?
No, that was a great recap, Rick.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna hone in on the second to the last bullet there all the time, but it's all very
absolutely
important to the program.
Yeah, we're close on questions here. I don't, let me see if I got any questions in this realm. There's a couple of involved questions here. Let's see. Yeah, what resources, tools are available to support the implementation of NIST 2.0? You want to take that one?
Yeah. So there's a ton of information out there, even if you just Google search NIST CSF 2.0. But if you go to the NIST site, you can see a ton of documentation in there to support implementing 2.0. The discussion document that we talked about, that was created and updated in April of 2023, that compares to 2.0 to 1.1. There's also case studies out there, a ton of reference material, and even an online framework tool that can help you guys, assessing your posture and starting to adopt the 2.0 framework. And
Yeah,
of course,
you'll get a copy of this deck here, and we've included a lot of the links that Dave just talked about from here, so you'll be able to look at the different areas to help you along. One last one here. How does NIST CFS align with other cybersecurity frameworks? So that's a good question. Really, it's designed to enhance, right? So if you're looking at leveraging existing investments with ISO 27001, COBIT, or other relevant frameworks, really what this is going to do is enhance those. So I always say the best way to build the best house is to have a solid foundation, and CFS is really going to give you that solid foundation. All right, let's wrap it up here. We got 3 minutes left. So next steps for you guys, go out and look at that cyber risk program maturity that I showed you. It's 20 questions. I said 10, but it's really 10 minutes, and it's gonna, you're gonna be able to download the report. We offer security workshops, so whether they're one-on-one, whether they're for your team, whether you want us to come in and do a complete program for you, we can do that on site. And we've even done it for customers that want to do it for their customers, where we've come in and done a cybersecurity workshop to show the customer how good their program is. You'll get a copy of the session recording from here. Join us at our next event. So we are having an open house. We moved to a great facility down in Canton, Mass. Very nice facility. When you walk in, there's an atrium, and you'll see we've done a lot of stuff with the modern technology that we offer to customers that we utilize ourselves. So come on down there. We'll send you a registration link. We're located at 150 Royal Street in Canton. It's same area as the Dunkin' Donuts World Headquarters, and it's going to start at 2 o'clock and go to 7 o'clock. So, Dave, with that, I'll wrap up. You have any last minute words?
Yeah, real quick. So take advantage of the security workshop. It's about a 90-minute exercise. We consider it in the pre-sales phase, so that there's not a charge for it, but we run through a gamut of security topics and conversations, and very interactive, and it can help you guys map what we see out there in the industry as opposed to what you have in place, and could help with a plan moving forward. And just to say, in specific to the open house, we will be talking about Cyber Range there, which is a new partner and capability of ours that is kind of brings tabletop exercises and also training internal staff to light. So if you can make the open house, awesome. Take advantage of the security workshop, and that's all I have.
Thanks. All right. And thanks everybody for joining us today. I'll turn it over to Rachel to wrap us up.
All right, well, thank you so much to Rick and Dave for sharing your expertise with us today. This was just a really great session. If you think of any questions at all after the call, don't hesitate to send them over, and I'll get those over to Rick and Dave so they can answer them for you. I'll also be sending a follow-up email with links to everything that Rick discussed today, as well as a link to this recording. And thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.